Fitzpatrick takes the snap, drops back, lobs it back right corner. Decker! He's got it! Touchdown! Eric Decker scores! And the Jets have won it in overtime!
This is the Jet Take with Ben Blessington and Kyle Fahey.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Jet Take. I'm your host for tonight, Kyle Fahey, and Ben has the flu. Ben's choking puke per usual, so he will not be joining us tonight. But do not fret, we have a wonderful guest to break down the Chicago Bears, and that is Brandon Hazlett from thebearsbros.com and the Bears Bros podcast. Hard to say off the tip of my tongue when you're just talking. But Brandon, how you doing?
Doing good. Actually, I had kind of an adrenaline rush before I got into this. The moon is absolutely big and beautiful tonight, and I went to go take a picture of it, and I almost ran into a deer going to take the picture. So once the adrenaline kind of calms down here, I'll be in much better shape. Other than that, I'm real good.
Were you in a car?
Oh yeah, I was driving.
Oh, okay. As a Jets fan, I know a thing or two about deers being stuck in headlights, so I think that's a solid way to kick off the show. Obviously, both of our teams coming off of losses that you guys had a little bit better of a loss. I don't think anybody really expected you to win that Patriots game. Mitch played well, but the Jets are coming off of a very ugly loss to the Minnesota Vikings, your divisional, I guess, brother, to make the pun there. Tell us about your experience with, the Patriots this year, because we got to play them twice this year. We haven't played them yet. We got to play them after the bye and then the last week of the year. So, what was it like facing those cheating SOBs from New England?
Well, it was definitely one that I didn't think that we all kind of thought here in Chicago that the game would be close. I didn't expect it to be by 1 yard. I was expecting it to be at least a two-score game, like a 10-point game at least, because our defense hasn't quite been itself since the bye week a few weeks ago. I was expecting the Patriots to put up a lot of points, and I was expecting our offense to keep pace, and they did that for the most part. But as long as you guys can get a pass rush on Tom Brady, there were a couple times where we had our rookie Blau Nichols in the backfield, and that's when Tom Brady, obviously he struggles because he's not much of an athlete as far as scrambling out of the pocket. So if you guys can get pressure to Tom Brady, I think that's really going to be the key.
Well, since you're talking about pass rushers, I think it came down to the Jets and Bears for the Khalil Mack trade, and I think the biggest question out of this is how much is a joke of John Gruden in your eyes?
Oh, I love it. I actually on one of my fantasy teams have the John Gruden logo on ESPN that says I love this guy, because being Chicago, we love John Gruden right now. We're always making fun of him as much as we can, but with Khalil Mack's right ankle injury, he didn't practice today, and since he hurt himself in Miami a couple weeks ago, he hasn't quite been the same, and neither's been the defense. So we're kind of hoping that him not practicing this week, but still being able to play hopefully on Sunday is going to give some good results here come Sunday when we play you guys.
How effective do you think Mack is going to be with that ankle injury? I saw a couple plays where it looked like he really just wasn't Khalil Mack. He looked more like a Jets edge rusher, to say the least.
Well, that's a good sign if that's what they look like. But him being with Khalil's injury, he still plays his gaps well. There's a controversial play on a run that Sony Michel had where Khalil Mack held his gap, and people were saying that that's his play that he's got to make, and a healthy Khalil Mack would make that tackle. But an injured Khalil Mack was going to hold his gap and let the linebacker come in and make the tackle. The linebacker did not come in and make the tackle, and it ended up being an 8 or 9 yard run on that play. But he still is able to do his responsibilities, but he is not the prolific strip sack per week rusher that we got used to prior to the bye week. So he'll still play, I think, because he's just kind of that superhuman athlete. But for the most part, he's not going to be as effective as he was in week 1 through 4.
Obviously, you guys have a lot of linebacker talent. You've invested not only a lot of money, but a lot of very high draft capital. Obviously, a couple picks with Mack, Roquan Smith, first-round pick this year. Not holding out anymore, correct? He's finally showing up now. Danny Trevathan, you guys signed him from Denver a couple years ago, and Leonard Floyd, obviously, 2 years ago in the first round. So there's obviously a lot of linebacker talent there. Do you think that's the strength of the defense right now?
I would say so, yeah. It's a lot of the strength of defense. But really it all kind of starts in the trenches. Guys like Akeem Hicks and Eddie Goldman.
Yep.
And one of the battles we were looking for throughout camp was who was going to end up opposite of Akeem Hicks, because those are the guys that plug the gaps, that allow the outside guys to get in there. And even with Khalil Mack, that opened up guys opened up holes for Akeem Hicks, Eddie Goldman. Roy Robertson-Harris has a sack and a half this year. Is an underrated guy in my opinion. But I think it all really starts up front. That's where the tone's been set under Vic Fangio's defense. It's always been Akeem Hicks, since he's been here in Chicago, has been that vocal leader, that energy guy that brings it every week. So I think it starts there, but it's definitely not an understatement to say that the most talented group on defense is the linebackers.
You talked about Eddie Goldman for a little bit. Eddie Goldman was a kid out of Florida State, and I'm a Gator fan. I live in Florida, so I hate to admit when I love Florida State players. But Goldman was just one of those guys on tape during the draft process back in 2015, I think, if I remember correctly, that I loved him. That was a steal for you guys. Second round, I think he ended up going. Just one of those guys, put him next to Hicks, who is probably one of the most underrated players in the entire NFL. He's kind of gotten the probably like the Damon Harrison treatment when it comes to that. I don't think he's on Snack's level, but in Snack's first couple of years, when people really didn't know who he was, he's that type of player right now where he is just a dominant force that coaches, when they put on the film, they're like, hey, this guy brings it every game. He's a consistently great player for you guys.
Yeah, he absolutely is, and he got a very well-deserved contract extension this offseason because, he's not necessarily the guy that's going to get after the quarterback every time. I don't think he's ever had more than 5 in a season. But he's always the guy that's going to stuff the run up the middle. He does not give up ground there in the middle as being the defensive nose tackle there. So he does a very good job of making sure that nothing gets through. And pair him with Akeem Hicks, who's one of the top individual run stuffers in the league this year. That defensive line is hard to break. So that's why we see a lot of teams trying to get out in space against the Bears defense.
Yeah, and right now the Jets offense is depleted due to injuries. I don't know how much you keep up with Jets football. I would hope you don't, because it is very depressing to watch consistently. And I'm 17 years old, and I'm convinced I'm getting gray hair. But this offense is depleted with injuries, and obviously Sam Darnold, rookie quarterback, you can't expect him to carry the weight of the world on his shoulders. I think you as a Bears fan with Mitch Trubisky can understand that. Last year obviously wasn't a great year, but I think most fans realized that it was all about developing the young players, specifically the young quarterback. And I think the Jets are in a very similar position that the Bears were in last year. So let's talk about Jets offense versus Bears defense. Obviously, Mac is the face. His ankle, we don't know what to expect from him. I'm assuming he'll play because he played last week, but we can't expect 100%. So let's just break this down by, positional groups. The Jets offensive line, I'm going to be honest with you, it's probably a C+ if we're giving it just to make it a basic grade. And I think this is something that your defensive line can take advantage of.
Yeah, I would say so. If I were to give a grade to the Bears defensive line, I would give it a B, but it's got a potential to even be higher. This group has, they do good in the run, but as far as the pass rush, we were expecting this to be, before the Khalil Mack trade, this was the group that we were expecting, they're going to have to get to the pass rusher. And when Khalil Mack isn't at 100%, this Bears defensive line has really struggled to even get to the quarterback. I've seen, couple failed stunt moves against the Patriots where they're just pushing both Akeem Hicks and Eddie Goldman back in these attempts to try and do that. So, right now it's a B- B kind of range because they do pretty decent in the run defense department there. But as far as pass rush goes, I would give the defensive line itself a C- at the moment.
And the Jets' strength at offensive line right now is tackle. So you guys really have to work inside because Spencer Long, our center, who is okay at best. He has some nice games every now and then, but we saw him last week where he put 6 balls over the head of Sam Darnold where he had to jump to get the snap, and obviously that messes up the whole play, messes up the timing, can't get the handoff.
Yep.
And then obviously he's not going to block right. He's dealing with a thumb issue. Now he's got a shoulder injury, so I'm assuming he's not going to play, which would mean Jonathan Harrison's going to fill in. I don't know if you know anything about Jonathan Harrison. That guy is trash. He's the reason that Andrew Luck was out for 2.5 years. Probably the reason Jim Irsay had to go to rehab, honestly. That's a horrible joke to make. But so I'm expecting Jonathan Harrison to be in there. The tackles are pretty solid, though, and then the guards on the inside, they have, like the center, they have their good days. And the running game, because of that, is not going to be a lot better. Today, Bilal Powell was put on the IR. Powell has been with us for 8 years. He's always been that dependable running back, can run over guys in the trenches, can run past you on little swing routes. He's just that all-around running back that doesn't get the credit he deserves. Put on the IR, huge loss for a rookie quarterback. So we're down to Isaiah Crowell and Trenton Cannon as of right now. And I know Crowell has had big games. Obviously, you probably saw his 232-yard game a couple weeks ago. But that's not Isaiah Crowell consistently. That was one really nice game for him that we can't expect every week. So I expect this running game to be pretty piss-poor against a strong Bears defense, especially with the names you guys have up front.
Yeah, but I wouldn't get your I wouldn't rule that out because we've seen since the bye week teams be able to run against the Bears. They're not once they get to that second level. I mean, we talked today on our audio mailbag for our podcast that guys need to be able to tackle in space. So if they can get to that second level, I mean, they might have some big rushes pushed off here because Frank Gore. I went to the game down there in Miami a couple weeks ago and it just seemed like he was consistently getting 8-9 yards. Before they knocked out Sony Michel. I mean, he was picking up, good chunks of yards at a time. So if they can really win the point of attack, the Jets' offensive line, and don't rule out a good running game for the Jets.
Well, obviously, I want us to win because we are no longer tanking, despite what some people in the media would tell you. I'm hoping for a win, so I hope you're right. Let's talk about your secondary. Obviously, Sam Darnold, rookie quarterback, having a pretty nice season, leads the league in interceptions right now, but I'm pretty sure 4 of those interceptions were off the hands of wide receivers, so just one of those stats that really don't mean anything. Well, obviously interceptions mean something, but the context of them is miscued. I know, yes. Yeah, I know Giants fans right now, because Jets and Giants fans are in a New York, New Jersey civil war. It's like, oh, Barkley's a lot better. Look how many interceptions Sam has. It's like, that's completely out of context. If you just watch the games, you would know it's not that. Sam's had his really solid games where he can pick apart defenses, and then last week it was rough to watch. It was really rough to watch. He looked like a rookie quarterback. And Quincy Enunwa, I'm assuming he's not going to play this week. We just signed Rashard Matthews off of the street, basically. I'm assuming he'll get solid reps. Robbie Anderson is someone I think the Bears should be legitimately concerned about. I don't know if there's anybody who you guys have who can really run with him.
Yeah, keeping with faster guys is something that our defensive coordinator, Vic Fangio, he'll tell the corners to back off. He won't jam at the line when facing faster guys because Kyle Fuller, Prince Amukamara, our 2 outside guys there, they don't keep up with speed very well. So they may put our nickel guy, Bryce Callahan, on there, who was a full participant in practice this week. He also is dealing with an ankle injury. But that would be the guy, the matchup to watch out for is how much they put Bryce Callahan on Robbie Anderson there because of the speed.
Is Bryce strictly, like when you say that, do you mean when Robbie lines up in slot, or can Bryce follow wherever Robbie goes?
He can follow wherever he goes. He's not a stranger to playing the outside, but they will put Kyle Fuller and Prince Amukamara on the outside more times than not. So don't be surprised if that's a matchup that the Jets offense tries to set up throughout the entirety of the game. I
think that's definitely something they'll go after because I respect Kyle Fuller as a pretty solid corner nowadays, and Prince Amukamara probably past his prime. Still obviously has some left in the tank, performing at a decent level for you guys for past 2 years, right? You guys signed him last year. Yep. Robbie is a guy who, if given the ball, this is his second year? I'm not sure exactly. I should probably know exactly when my players have been on the team. Undrafted free agent. But last year what we saw with Josh McCown was forced targets, which doesn't sound great in the NFL because then coaches can game plan for that. But when the guy just runs right past you, which Robbie Anderson does on a consistent basis, he's done it to some of the best in the NFL right now. Did to Marcus Peters last year in Kansas City, Malcolm Butler, Aqib Talib, the Atlanta Desmond Trufant. I mean, we have a list going. It's like the Browns quarterback jersey, where they just keep adding duct tape to the list of crappy quarterbacks. That's what we have Robbie Anderson right now with 20-plus yard touchdowns. I think we got like 10 guys on there so far that he just straight runs by. No matter how much space they give him, you can't, really run with him. He's just one of those fast guys. He's like, if Tyreek Hill wasn't a complete wide receiver, it would be Robbie Anderson. Because the one thing you can do to Robbie Anderson, if you press him at the line, if you can get the hands on him, which is the biggest part about him, because Robbie is just so fast and so fast twitch that a lot of corners can't even get their hands on him before he's gone. But if you can stop him at the line, he's done.
I'll tell you right now, one thing that we've seen both the Dolphins and the Patriots pick the defense apart with has been quick screen passes and passes to the flats to running backs. So that could be an area where Robbie Anderson really excels in this game because Bears have struggled to tackle in the open field these last couple of weeks. Adrian Amos was credited with 5 missed tackles against the Dolphins, all in open space. So that's got to be something that the Jets are going to look at and go, yeah, we can get this guy in space and he can take advantage of it.
Amos was a Pro Bowler last year. I mean, he had a really solid season, correct?
He did. He had a really solid year, and he's a guy that I really like and a guy that, a lot of people go, well, he hasn't grown a whole lot. But he's always been a solid, consistent guy. He plays every week. He tries to make the big hit, which is ultimately why I think he's missing these tackles because teams have finally keyed in on that. But he's a very sound, aggressive run defender as well. So I thought, I think he's still a very good safety, but he's got to be able to wrap up in space.
You brought up screens, and that's something that infuriates me with the Jets offense because when Quincy was healthy, and I think most people know who Quincy Newell is in the NFL by now, he's a threat to be reckoned with the ball in his hands. I mean, his yak percentage is just off the charts most of the time. He's out now, and we've been trying to go to these screens with 29-year-old Jermaine Kearse, who has never been known for his speed and has always just been that reliable guy in the middle of the field for both Seattle and the Jets now. And Robbie, just being the small body that he is, he needs to run past the guy, not sit back and wait for the ball and then shift. So they've kind of gone away from the screens, but it's been infuriating when we did have Quincy because we would just throw 10 screens a game. It was like they would work 50% of the time, but then eventually a guy's going to jump it because they know what's happening. And then the loss of Bilal Powell takes a lot of that, outside of the backfield play that you were talking about with the dump-offs. I mean, Trenton Cannon from, really small college. We drafted him this year. South Carolina State, I think, something like that.
Small school.
Yeah, it was super small school. I didn't even scout him. He wasn't on my radar or anything. I was shocked when we drafted him because I didn't even hear of the kid. But last week caught a really nice 40-yard swing pass. I mean, maybe that's something we can get involved, but we can't count on a 6th-round rookie to go and dominate what on paper is a very strong Bears defense. And I think the Bears know they're going against a rookie quarterback, or at least Vic Fangio does. I doubt that he's prepared to let Sam Darnold carve him up. I'm sure he'll be ready. It's just one of those things as the defensive coordinators where it's like, it's an insult if a rookie quarterback torches you. I feel that throughout the whole NFL, defensive coordinators pride themselves on that.
Yeah, and I certainly hope that he's prepared for it. The only thing that I really hope that he's really preached to his guys is they have to be able to tackle because that's really been the difference in these last couple games that we've lost in overtime to Miami and then last week to New England. If they wrap up Josh Gordon on that 50-something yard pass that Tom Brady threw to him, I mean, that might be a different game.
Yeah, I think you can, in those close games like that, just one play can really be the outlier. Last week, the score really did not tell the score of the Vikings-Jets game. That game was close from start to finish. Vikings started off very strong, then Kirk Cousins threw a couple lame duck passes in the second and third quarter that the Jets didn't capitalize on. We dropped 2 interceptions. There was one pass. It was a swing pass that was not a forward pass. It was just on the ground. And the Jets players stared on it. The Viking players stared on it and just did nothing until a Vikings player picked it up to throw it back to the ref, and they called it dead. Could have been an easy touchdown. It was at the 30-yard line, and at that point, it would have been a one-possession game. So I think a lot of these games that you can just highlight one play that it comes down to, and obviously last week with that Hail Mary, if Kevin White has 2-inch longer arms, I mean, that's tied game, right?
Yep.
Kevin White, I'm sure, has infuriated you guys for a while now with his lack of playmaking, seeing as you spent, the 11th pick on him?
Lack of playmaking. How about just lack of playing in general?
Yeah, well, you can't make plays if you're not playing. So.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I remember a couple of Pee Wee coaches saying that. Let's talk about your offense because
all right.
Mitchell Trubisky, he's been doing pretty well. I mean, he is definitely not the reason you guys have been losing.
Boy, it is so nice to hear an outside organization say that, because in Chicago it is very split about.
To be fair,
yes.
all the people on this podcast know I love Mitch Trubisky.
All right. So I guess with that little bit of bias aside, Chicago's pretty split on him. There's a lot of people that want him to win and win now, but some of us have to realize that he's still almost technically a rookie, because I don't want to say that he learned much under John Fox and Dowell Loggins with a run-pass system there last year, and then with a rookie head coach, pretty much a rookie offensive coordinator in the NFL with Mark Helfrich, who was with the Oregon Ducks for a while there. So. And he's still got a lot of learning to do. I mean, he's got NFL playing time from last year, but that's really about all he could take away, because now he's learning a whole new playbook, a whole new system again.
Yeah, what has Mark Helfrich brought to the NFL? I'm going to be honest. I haven't watched any Bears tape yet. I plan on doing that at some point on Friday, so I don't know what your tendencies are on offense. I mean, I know he's not running a college offense, or at least successfully.
No, he's brought a lot of the RPO system, and that very well could be Coach Nagy as well. As far as what those two like to do, they run a lot of RPOs, and that's why Mitch is the third rushing leader for this team, is because he's confident in being able to run and make plays with his feet, because he did that at North Carolina. So something to watch out for is that RPO, and they'll run it with Tariq Cohen a lot, because that's a guy who can get to the edge if there's nothing on the inside, because it's a lot of zone blocking schemes for the offensive line. So they want a guy who's going to be able to bounce outside if need be. So I would say watch for the RPOs, because that's something that they've really highlighted on as something that's going to be a staple in the offense.
Tariq Cohen's not Jewish, right? I think we've established that. That's like the whole joke there.
I don't think he is.
Okay. Very confusing. I know that like Ian Eagle just gets very confused when he reads that on paper. That just befuddles him. You guys got a solid running back core with Howard and Cohen right now. I mean, that's a solid threat there.
Oh, it absolutely is. And one thing that's really taken us by surprise, we kind of called out Jordan Howard last year after he dropped a couple crucial balls that could have potentially won games, going back to the one-play thing that you mentioned earlier. He's really improved his catching ability as a receiver out of the backfield. And one thing that we've been kind of clamoring for is for him to get the ball more, which is kind of odd, because last year we said he was getting the ball too much. But Matt Nagy likes to kind of shy away from the run game, unfortunately. With a guy like Jordan Howard, should really be a guy that we think they should have the ball to more times than not, in different various fashions, whether that be receiving the ball or whether that be running the ball up the middle like we know he can do, because when he runs and gets a rhythm going, he's very tough to stop, especially late in games, because he can keep going and defenses get tired. That's why they say, once you establish the run, it'll open up later. So that's something that we've been hoping to see more out of Jordan Howard, but he hasn't necessarily gotten to that point yet, because Matt Nagy prefers to throw the ball.
So what you're saying is that they're going to put the weight of the world on Mitch Trubisky, which is exactly what I was saying not to do earlier?
Yes.
Well, I will say right now is a good time to be playing the Jets secondary, because Tremaine Johnson, our number one corner, spent big money on. I'm sure you're familiar with him from the Rams. Good corner. We haven't missed him like he was the last ounce of water on earth, but he's definitely preferred in the secondary. He's going to be a game-time decision with a quad injury, and I think a veteran corner like that is definitely needed against a young quarterback in Trubisky. And Marcus May, our free safety, missed last week with a concussion. It looks like he's going to play, but right now we're just completely beat up in the secondary. If guys are going to play, they're going to be 75% at best. So this is a good time for Trubisky to be playing the secondary.
It is, but we also have to keep in mind Allen Robinson didn't practice today. He's been battling a groin injury, and he's been on and off throughout the season, but he really started to find his groove, his chemistry with Mitch kind of towards the middle of the year so far. But then he's kind of had this groin injury, and he didn't practice today. I don't know if we'll see him on Sunday, but that would make if Tremaine Johnson doesn't play and Allen Robinson doesn't play, that kind of washes that matchup out. And I think that might actually end up paying dividends for the Jets, because that's one less target, one less reliable target, I should say, that Mitch will have.
How has Trey Burton performed for you guys this year? Because in the past, tight ends have been a problem for the Jets. No tight end has really exposed us this year because we've had solid linebacker play, but it's always something that Jets fans have in the back of their mind.
Trey Burton, he's been a guy that gets to the middle of the field, and Mitch likes to be able to hit him. And we've seen last week how good of a confidence builder Coach Nagy is. when Trubisky runs a play, throws an incomplete pass, but Trey Burton's open over the middle. He ends up calling that play later in the game. They hit Trey Burton twice on that same play throughout the entirety of the game because now Mitch knows that one's there. And that's able to build confidence in Mitch. So Nagy's a good teacher in that way, but something to watch out for with the Bears' offensive play calling is sometimes they get, well, I shouldn't say that, a lot of times they get creative. You'll see tight ends, you'll see 3 of them in the game at sometimes, and sometimes you'll see 2 of them split out wide, and there's just a whole bunch of different formations that they like to run with these tight ends. And actually the Jets are kind of lucky that they don't have to face Adam Shaheen in this one, who's still battling his, or he's recovering from his broken foot that he suffered in the preseason. So we're actually -1 target, so you'll get to face instead Trey Burton and Deion Sims rather than Adam Shaheen. So you guys caught a break on that one.
Yeah, it sounds a lot better for us, and I'm borderline concerned about the tight end usage because with the secondary being so hurt, with Todd Bowles' system, we either find the strong side linebacker, which is usually Darren Lee, friend of the podcast, Darren Lee. That's a joke. That's an inside joke. You don't get that one. But
no,
we either have Darren Lee or Marcus May on the tight ends, and Lee, I don't think he practiced today. He'll probably play in the game. But with the concussion that May's coming off of, and he was also injured 3 weeks earlier this year, he didn't start till week 4 because of an injury. I mean, he's still relatively rusty. I mean, he's played for 2.5 weeks basically, and I don't know what the responsibility is going to be for him or what we can expect from him because you can't just expect a guy to come immediately back in and go against a guy who just got a huge contract during the offseason, and a rookie quarterback is looking to find that safety net because I think the Jets are going to have a pretty easy time with the wide receiving core with Allen Robinson being hurt. Taylor Gabriel, I think, had a nice game against us in Atlanta a couple years back. I don't know how productive he's been for you. And Anthony Miller was a guy I liked last year coming out of Memphis, I'm pretty sure.
Yes, Memphis.
Yeah.
Taylor Gabriel, he's had a handful of really productive games, especially in Miami when they were able to connect with him deep a couple times. I think that's really established some trust that Mitch can throw it deep and Taylor's going to go get it. But we didn't see it so much against New England because they were able to bring pressure, and that's what Mitch kind of struggles with. He gets a little antsy in the pocket, and he'll either run it himself or he'll hit the check down pass. So it doesn't really allow time for him to what was I trying to say here? It doesn't allow for him to establish Taylor Gabriel deep. So for that reason, I mean, Taylor Gabriel's a reliable weapon, but at the same time, we're going to have to watch and see how the pocket's going to be for Trubisky.
Before we wrap this up with the predictions, I want to quickly talk about your O-line. I'm looking at it right now. You got the Hard Knocks superstar in Eric Kush at left guard. Got a guy out of Kansas State and Cody Whitehair, who I think you guys have had for 2 or 3 years now, probably starting at center. I know you had Hornus Grossu for a little bit, but I think he's gone now. Kyle Long, obviously been a very good guard in the NFL for a while now. And then Bobby Massey and Charles Leno Jr. I've heard of Bobby Massey.
Leno?
Never heard of Charles Leno. So talk about your line.
Charles Leno, huh?
No.
Charles Leno is actually going to be the star of the offensive line, the left tackle. He's been graded one of the highest for PFF for a couple weeks as far as the Bears' offensive line goes, highest graded offensive lineman. Struggled a little bit against the Patriots last week, gave up 2 sacks on his side, but they weren't necessarily his fault as Trubisky stepping up in the pocket right into the guy that Leno's guarding. But they really struggled to generate any sort of push at the point of attack for a running game, which is kind of unfortunate, which is kind of why we don't see much of Jordan Howard, alluding to what I said earlier. Barrett Cush, he was out of practice today because he had a neck injury, so we may see the rookie James Daniels out of Iowa this week. He's also a pretty solid guy, very athletic kind of player. He'll get out there in space, get to that second level, and set up blocks there as well. Bobby Massey, we used to have a segment on the show called Who's He Going Up Against because he really was not that good when he first got here, but he's really developed into his own here as well. And Kyle Long's just this mean, nasty guy that I'm sure you've heard all about.
Yeah. Know a thing or two about the Long family. Oregon, right? He went to Oregon?
Oregon, yes.
Yeah, he wasn't there for Helfrich. Oh, maybe. Helfrich was the offensive coordinator.
I think he might have been.
Yeah, before the head coach. He wasn't there. Was he there for the championship game? Against,
I I don't remember off the top of my head. I got to go back and do some research on that one.
All right. Let's get into the predictions because I honestly think this is one of those games that the Jets have zero business being in with all of our injuries and just with the current circumstances of the roster. It kind of reminds me of last year's Jacksonville game where the Jets just clobbered a very, very good Jacksonville Jaguars team for absolutely zero reason and just hurt our draft stock. We've broken it down. I think the Jets have their clear advantages. I think the Bears have their clear advantages. I don't know how windy it's going to be, which will definitely affect the game. But let's see if it lives up to the Windy City. Brandon, what's your prediction for this game?
I'm going to have the Bears winning this one. If the secondary is beat up for the Jets, I think that's an advantage that Mitch can take. But if you guys take Robbie Anderson, like we said all the way back to the beginning of the show, get him into space, then it's going to create a shootout, I think, a little bit more than what we would think. So I'm going to have a higher scoring prediction here. I'm going to say the Bears 30. We'll say the Jets 23.
I'm going to go similar. I like the idea of a shootout because I think these are defenses who look really good on paper right now, both very close to being very top-level elite defenses, kind of like what the Eagles had last year. I think the Bears are a lot closer to that than the Jets are. And I think for that reason, when it comes into a scoring match, that without Quincy Enunwa, without Terrell Pryor, we don't know what to expect from Sam Darnold. I think Mitch Trubisky is on a tear right now with his legs and his arm. I think the Bears get it done. I'm going to guess 27-19 Bears.
Okay.
All right. I think that's where we'll leave it off. Brandon, thank you so much for coming on. Why don't you go ahead and give us all your stuff for promoting your Twitter, Instagram, your podcast feed. Obviously, you do a lot of great work with the Bears Bros podcast and the site there. You guys got some merch. I don't know if you want to promote some merch. I like the Bear Claw shirt.
I do too. That's actually been a really popular one, but I'll go ahead and throw in a plug. You can check us out online at the website at thebearsbros.com. From there, you can go to bearsbros.com/gear. Check out all of our gear. From there, you can also find our blog. Our writers do an excellent job of writing Bears content each and every day throughout the week. Or you can check us out on our podcast at the Bears Bros. You can find us on iTunes, on Google Play Music. We're on Spotify now, which is pretty cool. We're on iHeartRadio as well, Twitcher, a lot of the big podcast streaming places. You can find us at the Bears Brothers. So give us a look.
All right, Brandon, thanks for coming on.
All right, thank you so much for having me. Thanks for reaching out.
My pleasure.